Hi, everyone. Happy Thursday, and welcome to another exciting AdvisorShares AlphaNooner. Today, we're excited to welcome Scott Grossman, VP of Corporate Development at Turning Point Brands. We're excited to talk through what has been a great year so far for Turning Point, and then, of course, talk through what is going on the larger space for cannabis and how Turning Point Brands sees opportunity there at present. So, good reminder, if you're out there and you want to join the conversation, you're always welcome to do that. You can put your questions or comments in the chat, and we'll try to get to them as we go along. So with that all out of the way, Scott, thanks for joining us. How's your day so far?
It's going great. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Going great. Weather's beautiful here. I feel like it's finally getting into that sweet spot of spring. So really, really enjoying it, having a good time, I think, in general. Would love to start just because, kind of first time on for a long time. So would love to start with sort of that background, sort of that table setting for anyone who's new and joining. Can you give us a little bit of your background and kind of your path into Turning Point Brands before we jump in kind of a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. So just prior to joining Turning Point 4 years ago, I spent about 3 decades as a hands-on active investor focused on companies undergoing change, really predominantly across consumer and business services. I started my career on the private equity and private credit side, and then migrated to the public universe as an engaged shareholder. I would say the consistent thread is partnering with management teams and help them catalyze that change. And given that experience and the fact that I've been a cannabis advocate and consumer for over 30 years at this point, and I've been watching very closely the impending green wave, really starting in the mid 2010s, I would say. And I just knew there would be a time not too far away then that every single consumer investor and operator would appreciate the gravity of this emerging industry. And for me, it really started impacting my portfolio when I was on the hedge fund side, I would say 2016, 2017, and that's when it really got my attention. Turning Point is kind of a relationship. They had reached out to me. They needed some help leading on the cannabis efforts, and I've been a VP of Corporate Development since May of 2021. I spend 90% of my time plus on all things cannabis, M&A, strategic partnerships, new product development, relationship management, and I report right into the CEO and chairman.
That's great. So very deep in
Turning Point.
What'd you say?
I'm happy to go into that as well.
Yeah, we'd love to do that. Before we jump in, I would love to, just because it seems like you've been in cannabis and had been able to kind of see the path for cannabis pretty early on, it sounds like. What kind of drew you in? What kind of, made the signals beep that like, hey, this is something that could be interesting? Was it, friends? Was it your own personal experience? What kind of really signaled that to you?
So like I said, I've been a consumer for 30 years. I'm not the traditional cannabis consumer. I'm a type A, very high anxiety financial investor. And I just never understood. I spent a lot of time on prohibition in college. I was an econ major. I went to my first normal meeting in 2000 and, as a freshman in college. So 1996, right before Prop 215. And I just felt this is one of the unique consumer stories where the market was predominantly existing prior to legalization. And so it didn't really take a ton of thought to understand the gravity of how big this industry could be. I think what was compelling and interesting to me was that it was just a blank slate, right? It was companies, and I was fortunate enough to meet many of the MSOs back in 2013 and 2014 when they were conceptualizing the framework, and I came away pretty convicted that there was going to be this state-led expansion, timing uncertain, but it was effectively trying to understand that this was $100 billion market that had existed in the shadows for 50 plus years. And the question was, and why I found it so interesting was, as it became more normalized and ubiquitous, it would not only require, professionals like us to really help drive the change, but also thinking through the chess pieces and the entire value chain and where you can create a lot of value, both as an investor as well as an operator.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And again, I think it's funny that you flag yourself as someone who might not be seen as the typical cannabis user, but I do think it's such a wide net nowadays. It can be people who are very type A, it can be your sort of classic, more stonery
For
person,
sure.
but I think it really can encapsulate a ton of different people now, as we've seen it kind of come out of the shadows, like you're saying. But then, yeah, would love to turn kind of to Turning Point Brands itself, just to give a little bit more history and context there. Would love to get sort of the high level view, kind of the core brands that you're working on, and kind of the structuring for cannabis as well.
Absolutely. So Turning Point at the heart of it is a branded consumer products company. We're led by our iconic brand Zigzag, which, as you may know, is the leading rolling paper in North America with a rich 145-year-old iconic history. That's a lion's share of our business today. And Stoker's, which is on the MST tobacco side. And now within Stoker's, we have this very fast growing nicotine white pouch business under the brands Free and Out. I would say at a high level, our products are found in over 180,000 stores across North America at this point, from convenience stores to smoke shops to head shops, and now, of course, servicing the entire cannabis value chain from processors and manufacturers on the pre-roll side, the dispensaries, the head shops, like I mentioned. And so we're pretty ubiquitous. And I would say, in last year, we generated about $360 million in revenue, up 11%, and about $100 million in EBITDA. We're listed on the New York Stock Exchange. We're roughly a $1.3 billion market cap with a very clean balance sheet. Our approach is pretty simple. We're an omni-channel model. We sell B2B as well as B2C. We're in store, so on premise as well as online. And just given the brand portfolio and what we do, we generate very healthy margins north of 20% EBITDA, and we are asset light. So we generate a significant amount of free cash flow, which we've been deploying, obviously, in our business and our team, but also we've been pretty proactive buying back our securities, both on the convert side, which is 23, 24 story, and now on the equity side. And always looking for strategic investments in M&A. Alp is a great example of that, which we did in Q4 of last year.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Being able to post those numbers, I think makes a really, really strong difference, in being able to do that with sort of the access to cannabis ultimately, but sort of being that more picks and shovels play, I think makes a big difference, especially in the current environment that we're in. Would love to hear, what you credit, I guess, ultimately the success for Turning Point, especially even in, this year. If anyone's looking at the stock chart for Turning Point, it has had a very strong 2025. Are you crediting that to sort of the, strength of the brand that you're talking about, which, even me in college, I had a Zigzag poster on my wall. I'm not a tobacco user, was not a cannabis user at the time, but I think just that sort of iconic element of it is so important. Is it that team sort of strength? What sort of the things that kind of feed into that success?
It's a great question. I would say we went public in 2019, and I'd say we're still very much running the playbook from the IPO. So on the Zigzag side, it's maintaining and growing our number one share to capture more growth, especially as cannabis has been turned on across the United States by offering new products and services across this growing channel. On the Stoker side, it's had a very long track record at this point of increasing market share and a very stable MST, moist snuff tobacco business with very favorable pricing dynamics. And in terms of this year and where the stock is going, we're clearly geared towards big tobacco. And in 2024, 2025, the white pouch opportunity is probably, objectively the most exciting consumer product story that really no one talks about. And I think that's probably because it's being led by big tobacco. The white pouch industry is slated to be $5 to $7 billion by the end of this decade. And that's starting from a standstill, call it 3-4 years ago. So it's a massive opportunity that we are participating in. And it's led by a very consolidated group of players. The number one, as you know, is Philip Morris, but we're right there behind them with BAT. And so it's been a really good story for us. We're participating in that growth. Specifically, we grew in Q1. This is all backwards looking, as you can appreciate. We grew revenue 28%. And that's been driven by really all three of our businesses, but predominantly by the white pouch business, where we've upped guidance to $80 to $95 million in white pouch revenue for the year, which is a meaningful lift on a $360 million business. And so I would say all of those factors are what's driving the results, focusing on what's in our control, which is our playbook, and also drafting on big secular consumer themes, both cannabis and now white pouch, that we can participate in given our business model.
Yep, I think that tight focus and sort of that, I guess, ultimately adapting and evolving where the trends are. I know from tobacco, traditional tobacco, like cigarettes, has kind of moved away. That's sort of, we've seen that decline generally, and that has been kind of replaced in some ways by cannabis. But again, I know the pouch element has become incredibly popular on the tobacco side or the nicotine side, because technically, I guess, ultimately it doesn't have to be tobacco. It's ultimately nicotine, right? So I guess,
Yeah, there's no tobacco. That's
okay.
that's the aha moment.
Sure.
They're called reduced risk products, and there's no tobacco in it. It's just using nicotine, which is still controversial. But whether it's Peter Attia or other mainstream, I'll call them alpha males and women,
Sure.
who are looking to nicotine as a performance tool, just like cannabis.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. All right, well, that's fantastic. Again, I think in a good blend of businesses as things are kind of heading into the rest of 2025. Would love to spend just a little bit of time kind of talking about the cannabis side of the business and sort of the supply for all of the accessories kind of on that front. I know it's been kind of an interesting environment on the cannabis front that you've definitely seen evolve over the years, or have some fits and starts, I guess, ultimately. Would love to hear kind of, what progress would mean on the cannabis side for something like Turning Point Brands, for more of those cannabis related brands like Zigzag in your portfolio?
That's a good question. So, as this green wave has taken over and we've seen state expansion, we've clearly drafted off that, right? We have 12,000 new dispensaries. We have 30 to 50,000 head shops and smoke shops. There are more distributors that are popping up. We service the entire value chain to our bulk cone. As we've introduced new products to service this growing and evolving cannabis consumer, Zigzag has played a role in some way, shape, or form. What I would say on the regulation, it specifically not much on the margin. We clearly advocate for legalization. We're in favor of it. I would say more of the conversation, whether it's 280E or Schedule 3, it really helps our consumers. It should be obvious that it clearly helps the MSOs and anyone in the regulated side. And a stronger consumer for us is a stronger Zigzag. And so that's really where we've been focused. And I would say I very much keep my finger on the pulse. I'm in 20 markets a year. I'm probably in 100 dispensaries a month and over 100 head shops a month easily across the country. And so I pay very close attention to the health of the regulated market as well as what's going on in the hemp-derived space.
So sort of that real boots on the ground view of what's actually happening inside the stores. Has there been anything interesting that you have noticed recently that's been kind of interesting if you're really digging into those specific dispensaries and locations?
Yeah, I would say that, in a lot of ways, the cannabis industry is moving very quickly, but the themes that I talk about, at least on Twitter, they're really longer secular waves, and so they take time to play out. We spend a ton of time arguing for and against hemp-derived, but the reality is the THCA conversation, that really, we started seeing signs of states kind of like clamping down last year. And so what people are reacting, especially investors, are reacting to today was something that we had anticipated as a 2025 event. On the other side, I would say the beverages is way bigger in my judgment than people are giving credit to. Now, clearly regulations will have an impact on the ultimate TAM for hemp-derived beverages, but it feels to me like that part of the market is really been underappreciated. And, whether you look at big alcohol, Brown-Forman reported today, it's clearly a secular story. And that's something that we were watching very closely. On the regulated cannabis side, I don't have, much to add than what's in the conversation. It's been an extremely challenging time. There's very little capital sloshing around. There's very little investor demand. And so, the themes that I talk about, the strong get stronger, bifurcation, dispensary 2.0, those are all big themes that have been playing out for 4 years now. And I continue to expect those to be in the conversation in the coming months and quarters and certainly years.
That makes sense. So sort of an intensifying of trends that we've already been seeing for a while, but as conditions remain the same and sort of the same pressures exist, those kind of intensify ultimately. So that makes sense. In terms of, getting deeper into the cannabis side of the space from a, company perspective, is that on the table when and if things, turn around from a regulation perspective, outside of kind of the current offerings? Is that something that it would kind of grow into? What's sort of the thought in terms of, getting that deeper exposure potentially in the cannabis side of things?
Yeah, so it might be some helpful just to kind of give some context. So prior to me joining, the team was candidly a little bit scattered on our cannabis strategy, and my mandate coming in again 4 years ago was really level setting the senior management team and the board, just to try and figure out what we think the end state could look like, and having a high conviction view on how that plays out and ways for Turning Point to participate. And so coming out of that mandate was really trying to be a student and a strong partner to the entire value chain. I mentioned some of the people that we work with, but we've made minority investments in the past. Old Pal is a great example, all non-plant touching since we're publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange. And we look at pretty much every single deal that's coming through the pipeline. That gets us smarter. We understand businesses better. We understand how they make money. We understand how they can be synergistic with our Zigzag portfolio. And really, that's how we've been playing it. Never say never, but I think what we've been good at was coming up with what I call like first principles of how could we participate in this growth. And I would say, number one, it has to be synergistic with Zigzag. And, we're not a venture capital fund. We're not a private equity fund. Our capital is permanent and it's strategic. And so we really have to underwrite durable franchises with a real business model that meets our hurdle rate. And so we've been really disciplined and will continue to be disciplined. But we are actively looking at opportunities. And if the opportunity presents itself, we are definitely prepared to, dig deeper. But I would say in terms of making a large scale investment at this time is certainly not on the table.
Yeah, not just for the sake of doing it ultimately. I think always you want a really, really, well thought out plan, and you're really kind of trying to test any acquisitions or any sort of partnerships, I guess, ultimately. But I'm sure that's, again, only an intensified version of that currently right now, which makes sense. All right, that's super interesting.
You got it.
I'm seeing a question from Skip, which is interesting and kind of ties into the conversation still around the quality of brand and really having that strong brand ultimately. He's asking, I'd be interested to know how the Zigzag cones are performing compared to the regular papers. So out of curiosity, in terms of even within a brand, how things are comparing and working.
That's a good question. I would steer you towards our previous transcripts.
Sure.
I don't believe we actually break out our products, but cones is a growth category for the entire industry, and it's no different for us. I would say cones, when we launched them in 2019, it was more, under the thesis that as ubiquity and normalization would occur, there are just a lot of people who don't know how to roll joints.
Sure.
And so it's a much more convenient form factor. We've done a really good job packaging them. They sit on shelf in a way that rolling papers don't actually have a similar presence. And it's just been a fantastic addition to the portfolio.
That's awesome. And again, I think you're right. In hopefully that's an encouraging sign that there are people out there who don't know how to roll a joint ultimately, because that means more people are participating, more people are kind of seeing the, use for cannabis, and kind of that acceptance element is going up, which is great. All right, fantastic. And then I would love to just talk through again with the brand element across different products, but especially for Zigzag, how are you building and reinforcing
Yeah.
it? Because I think coming in on a really, really strong brand, like I mentioned, and like most people obviously know, but how are you sort of reinforcing that as we're, in 2025, for example?
Great question. So anytime you have a 145-year-old legacy brand that's as iconic as Zigzag, it's a challenge. I think it comes down to authenticity, cultural relevance, and quality. We are definitely a quality first brand. We're not the cheapest on the shelf. And Zigzag has been one of those brands that's been part of pop culture organically. From being on the album cover of Dr. Dre's The Chronic to Mac Miller to Afro Man. I'm going off the top, Beastie Boys. Zigzag's been cemented in pop culture, whether it comes to music, film, skating, fashion, of course, cannabis. And so our main job is really understanding that and appreciating that and not screwing it up, right? And so what we've inherited, and I think we've done a good job carrying the mantle of trying to elevate the premium quality, doing collaborations with high-end fashion companies like Amiri. We've done a very high-end grinder with Flour Mill. We've worked with Revelry in the cannabis chain. So anything that we put out to expand our portfolio is really trying to drive home being a solutions provider to obviously the end customer, but also the distributor as well as the MSO dispenser, the head shop, to have a full breadth of quality products that fits, again, the evolving consumer.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'd imagine, again, at a time where I feel like there are new people coming into the space, new people who are trying to find their brand, trying to find their paper as they are getting into cannabis, it's probably very important now more than ever to kind of really establish that high quality and kind of vibe is ultimately the wrong word, but ultimately that brand portfolio presence. And again, that can be done across a wide breadth of products and different things. Definitely had been looking at the site and was looking at some of the swag that you guys had created, and I think some solid designs, very wearable, which I think makes a difference in terms of just distributing that brand and getting that echo out there, which is great. Oh, there you go. You've got it on right now. There you go. I love it. It's good.
I do have it on. Yeah, I mean,
That's awesome.
it's been our apparel and our accessories is relatively new. I mean, when I came here, it was very small, and we're continuing to be smart about expansion and tie in our accessories and our apparel again with our core products. And I'm of the belief that innovation sells legacy, and so if we do a good job on both, it's a real powerful dynamic going forward.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I'm seeing some stuff which is great, some solid brand loyalty, which is solid. Love to see it. Zigzags or nothing, which is great. Also, yes, it's fine to learn how to roll a joint, no worries. All right, well then, I feel like just sort of taking it from a wider view, when investors are looking at Zigzag or obviously Turning Point Brands at large, is there anything that maybe people are missing? I'm sure, again, you guys are posting great numbers, so I think that's something that you can definitely look at and turn to. But anything that's sort of misunderstood, something that you think that people are not appreciating fully enough about sort of where you guys are as a company and the direction and everything, would love to just speak to that briefly.
Sure. Great question. I think at the end of the day, the core business is very durable, produces very high margins, throws off a ton of cash. And over time, at least for the time that I've been here, I think investors have been missing the optionality of the newer platforms that are predicated on what we're really good at, which is be able to deploy products throughout the United States on over 180,000 shelves and throughout North America. I would say that's probably the heartbeat of what we've been doing a good job at, and we'll hopefully continue to do a good job of. And we've been cheap. We've been pretty cheap for a very long time, and I think investors now are understanding that. the power of the brands, the power of the growth, and really we're exposed to within consumer. Consumer is a tough sector right now, right? There aren't that many stories that resonate as much as cannabis as well as white pouch. And with a portfolio of ours and the stability of the core, it just gives us a lot of degrees of freedom to continue to move the needle.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. I think it's a great way to kind of tap into sort of that more legacy with the nicotine element, but in a modern way, and then also have that optionality with cannabis, but in the present, and again, in a way that is unburdened by 280E and some of the complexities of running sort of more of a plant touching side of things, as that kind of works itself out ultimately. So again, I think that's very
You got
solid.
it.
Is there anything that's sort of on your radar? Obviously, I'm guessing rescheduling or federal change is obviously one of those things, but anything on your radar that people should be kind of keeping an eye on, that they should be watching as sort of for the business in the sector as we're in 2020?
I would say more of the same. Clearly it's been very painful on the cannabis side. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a ton of pain that's probably still yet to come, particularly on the credit side with the refinancing wall that's coming up in 26 and 27. Everyone's really focused on any changes in the regulatory framework, whether it's on the Farm Bill coming in September, but clearly all eyes are focused on what the president and the administration will be doing on whether it's Schedule 3 or safe banking. For me, I think it's more of the same, unfortunately. And what's really interesting is, I speak about it a lot, but the theme of bifurcation, the haves and the have-nots, it feels to me very heightened. And it's something that we are certainly watching as we go forward.
That makes sense. So again, that continued intensification of kind of previous setups, ultimately, that makes sense. All right, well then I guess sort of the
Agreed.
final thoughts a little bit is, I know that you and I both will be in Benzinga coming up next week, which will be good.
Yep.
I know you've been before, you've done it before. Would love to hear, any hopes, expectations for you this year. I know it's great to be able to kind of chat with some of the operators in the space, get a sense of kind of what they're seeing from their own perspectives. Any sort of thoughts for that coming up?
Yeah, so I travel a ton. I do a ton of trade shows, both on the cannabis side as well as on the call it the alternative distribution side, whether it's
Sure.
champs, etc. And these types of conferences are really valuable for me because I get to interface with a lot of my partners and my customers. So I'm really looking forward with some FaceTime with people I haven't seen, frankly, in call it 3 to 6 months. I'm interested to see innovation. That's really where I get really excited as a consumer as well as an investor. I'm very much focused to see what's changed in the portfolio. And I would say, again, just networking and just trying to be a source of value, right? One of the luxuries that Zigzag and that I have is I can be pretty objective and I can help customers as well as suppliers figure out ways, first hear their problems and then figure out who can help solve them. And in doing so, it helps solve other people's problems. And so I'm very much focused on continuing to do that. And it should be a good trip.
That's
I'm
exciting.
excited.
All right, well, looking forward to seeing you there. Looking forward to seeing everyone there. I think that'll be a really fantastic way to get kind of a heartbeat on where things stand currently. So definitely looking forward to that. Would say if anyone's out there and wants to kind of follow along with what's going on at Turning Point, learn some more information, kind of check you guys out. Where would you point people to do that, to find more information and kind of follow along as things get updated?
Yeah, the best place is probably turningpointbrands.com on our investor relations page. And in terms of me, I'm on Twitter. I'm pretty visible. I'm SRG444. Just for full disclosure, those are my opinions. Those are not Turning Point's.
Sure.
I clearly am very passionate about markets,
Of course.
and so I tend to talk about what I'm really passionate about as well outside of Turning Point.
That's good. Again, I think you do want someone that's very plugged in, cares a lot. I think that makes a big difference. Where did the 444 come from? I get the other part of your handle. Where's the 444 from? Anything?
I have no idea. I think it was generated back in 2011 when I joined Twitter.
Early days. All right. Well, that's awesome. Well,
So I
thanks.
stuck with it.
That's fair. I love it. That's great. All right. Well, Scott, thanks for taking the time. Really, really appreciate it. Everybody who's out there, definitely recommend taking a look, getting some more information. Again, it's been having a great, 2025 so far. So that's fantastic. Scott, thanks so much. And I will see you relatively soon. Thanks everyone out there. Really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thanks, McKenna.
Before investing, carefully consider the investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses found in the prospectus, available at AdvisorShares.com.